but there's other ways to teach the same concepts,
Right.
the same results that don't have so much limiting factors in terms of like movement and shaping and connection.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We are here to help train your eyes so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training and experience in both partnered and solo dancing. Cassie has about 24 years and I have about 26, and I think that's what our years are. So tonight we did have something else planned. I don't know if you had changed it on the Facebook or not, but
it was still TBA on Facebook, so
okay,
I left myself a back door for last minute changes because I had a rough week. So we're just doing a chill. We like this. Alicia found it. I love it. We're gonna just have a chill old time.
So we are taking a look at Emeline Rochefeuille and Jakub Jakoubek from what event is it?
The Grand Prix reunion.
Global Grand Prix.
That's it.
2022.
Yep. The link will be in a card up above, y'all. Go take a look.
I love when she like
the little fingertip thing.
He's just like, okay.
I also love it. He is so suave when he pushes his glasses back up. I don't know what it affects me anyways.
Kind of like Estelle when she like takes her glasses off to do her one,
right? Yeah.
Same vibe there.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like, I like this dance so much I always forget it's to Grenade, which is a song that, like, kind of on principle I hate. I have too many flashbacks to that song being super popular back in the day, and everybody miming taking a grenade to like the chest, throwing their hands on blades. It was just, the miming was too much. It was that.
Yeah. I don't remember when this was popular, but I feel like it's a fairly old song at this point.
Yeah, I don't like to think about it.
Yeah, but I do like the cover of it that they used. And I really enjoyed how they interpreted it to the cover. Thought it was too. It was very, I mean, Jakub and Emeline, they typically are rather smooth in their dancing, but like, I think just their style plus the vibe of the cover like matched so well. So it was in particular an enjoyable dance, in my opinion. Probably why I got first.
All right, do the screen share. So in our episode where we were talking about like precision versus perfection, like both Jakub and Emeline tend to be very like precise dancers and have almost created their own kind of perfection within West Coast Swing, and that's why they're just so captivating. It's like that really smooth dancing, and this dance has like a lot of West Coast Swing content in it, and it did get first place. I want to add that for context.
One thing about Jakub and Emeline, because you're talking about the precision versus perfection episode that we did, they do a really nice blend of those two things, because like, yes, they do have some moments where they kind of freeze, and it's like she has a really perfect line, like it's super precise where they're placing things, like it's really nicely done. But then they also have the moments of like relaxing into things and letting it flow through. So I think these two are a really good example of like being able to blend those two mentalities, where you really want to do things perfectly and look really nice and have good lines and all that, but then just also that being able to let it flow and let things go where they may. Like, they have such a good blend of that in their dancing. And a lot of that is because like this moment here at the very beginning, you can see like they have this kind of moment where they're frozen and they're kind of pausing to see where things are going to go. And that's when like she has some really nice lines and she leaves them there, right? And then she just kind of lets it melt. So they really achieve it by kind of when they can, they take the opportunity to have just like a really perfect moment and then let it melt into something else. So, as follows, right? We want to always try and get ourselves angled back into the connection. And now Jakub has his whole arm around her back, which is whatever, it doesn't really matter in terms of what I'm talking about. But Emeline is wanting to kind of get herself pitching into that almost, right? And so you can kind of see she presses back onto the heel and she kind of lets herself fall backwards, like away from his body, but like into his arm. And that's interesting because, right, so she's trying to achieve that, but he kind of moves towards her a little bit, right? And so actually kind of falling backwards a little bit. And she manages it super well. She just does a little styling with her foot where she kind of heel toes it backwards. But I just wanted to point that out because like that's something that is intentional, yes, in terms of the way that she's styling the foot, but it's because she is kind of falling backwards a little bit because he moves towards her a little bit, right? He doesn't quite give her the resistance and opposition that she thinks she might get.
Right.
Or that as a follower you should be looking for. So she just kind of goes with it.
And I just in general really love this choice because this is one of the most unique kind of starters I've seen in a long time. Yeah. And Jakub is basically doing a joint scroll, an extended scroll to stage left. And like Alicia was saying, Emeline doesn't fight that with a preconceived notion that the beginning of the dance is going to be her going forward.
Right.
They're both taking their time and having a lot of patience to find what's next.
Yeah.
Together and not resisting it. And just as an added point of clarity, I know I kind of harp on leaders putting their whole arms around follows in close position a lot, but it works here because their upper bodies are pressed together. It's like a hug. It's when your upper bodies are not pressed together and the leader has their whole arm around that it creates like a really claustrophobic feeling. And it makes it
like clotheslining from behind.
Yeah.
Which is a problem.
Definitely.
We don't want to clothesline our follows.
Nope.
But that is not what's happening here. So, which is why I said, you know, him having his hand all the way around her back is irrelevant to her, you know, moving backwards and falling backwards ever so slightly.
Right. Because she's very much supported.
But so the way that he has his hand, it's yes around her back, but it's not so much around her back that it's restraining her from moving, which is, I think, typically what we get when we have that hand all the way around the back. And that's why it's a problem. Right. So it's like supporting her, but it's not so much that she can't move, like he's letting it move with her. It's just enough structure.
And I want to highlight the distinction between his foot strikes and his weight transfers, because since he's doing essentially like a delayed weight transfer where he's having a strike and then moving his center over that foot, it's creating a much gentler directional intent. So she's not being yeeted in that direction. So that's why they can move slowly together, is because of how he's doing his weight transfers.
Yeah. And you can like see like through this whole section where they're kind of moving backwards, Emeline is not like, you can kind of tell she's not necessarily expecting to be stopped. but she's also not kind of stopping herself from falling backwards almost. She just kind of goes with it and allows her feet. What she does is she allows the upper body to move as it may, and then she takes the feet and kind of styles them, but does it underneath her. Right. So she starts out with the little heel toe walk. And then because he gives a little bit more energy, she takes a larger step. And then she does a little crossover, like cross in front, cross in front, cross in front, like, and then she takes one more step back. And so she's not fighting anything. She's not trying to stop herself from falling backwards because that would stop their momentum. But she's, she's just going with the flow.
Yeah.
And trying to intentionally place the feet underneath her, wherever that may be.
Interesting, because one of the hardest things I've had to work on unlearning is when I'm going forward versus when I'm going backward. Because we're taught a very clear, like, forward on 1, back through 6, and forward on 1, back through 6, and that is a really helpful training wheel concept in the beginning of your dancing as a follow. But I would say we hold on to those training wheels in the structure of how we teach this dance way too long. And it makes things harder for follows in the long run.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like once you get to a certain level, everything just kind of gets thrown out the window.
Yeah. All right. So after this starter step, I love how clearly Jakub stops Emeline and then scrolls away right here through this section. And while it may look like he's doing it with the open handhold, remember that as a leader, if you have access to the follow's torso directly, either through their back or their hips, that is the primary lead. And the open handhold becomes an accessory to like stabilize it or emphasize it, for example. So because he stops moving for a hot second, yes, he's providing compression here, but the other thing that's happening is this is no longer driving that way. And the combination of those two messages makes it clear to Emeline that he wants her to stop progressing down the slot, so that way he can scroll away.
Yeah.
The art of stopping a follow on purpose is a magical thing to learn as a leader. Like, it's easier to do in a slow song because you have literally more time to convey that message, and you can do it in a more easily stable way. Be like, here, come to a nice soft cushion landing. I'll be with you shortly. BRB. With a fast song, the amount of control and clarity and power that a leader needs to use to be like, hold on a second, I'll be with you shortly.
Yep.
You can tell by the way I'm intonating differently the point I'm trying to make.
We should talk about the angle that they use
for this passing tuck.
Coming out of it.
Yeah.
So, like, you can see here that they were in like a straight line, but then as they're kind of coming back to face each other, they're at an angle, and they just kind of go with it instead of forcing the back to the straight line. Because this is actually just kind of what's more natural from where they were at and the timing that they were using. And that's totally fine. I think one thing that we've been talking about recently is like that you don't always have to be, on a straight line. Like it's okay to have different angles and, like individually or as a partnership. Like you don't always have to be going back to said straight line. Like, yes, there's a slot, but like the slot can move as you see fit, depending on where you're ending, where you're starting.
Yeah. And the distinction that broke me was I had been thinking of away energy as like relative to the slot. And that's not how I thought as a leader. which just goes to show like my leader skills are based on me just leading out in the wild for a long time. I haven't explicitly trained in my leading, and oddly enough, therefore my leading is better. It's all the excess training in my following that actually made my dancing worse for the longest time. And now I'm just like peeling back. Yeah. The metaphor I used with the student last week was like teachers had been just piling band-aid over band-aid over band-aid over band-aid on top of a symptom.
Yeah.
And what you've helped me do over the past several years is figure out how to peel off all of those band-aids and then find the symptom underneath and be like, let's approach this holistically. What is creating this symptom? And then addressing that, just like,
yeah.
And like, that's how I've always taught leading. And now you've empowered me to be able to teach following in a similar way. So back to this ideas, one of the band-aids I had been given was away means relative to the slot, but away means relative to your partner.
Yeah.
So if you have so if you have this slot, but you happen to have one partner over here and one partner over here, this is the away energy. Bird's eye view, again, in case that wasn't clear.
Yep.
And that's how you're able to get really beautiful, like tethered things that take their time to get back to a normal slot direction. But in this example, Jakub he's in no hurry to get back to the slot orientation.
Yeah.
And he has the slot on a 45 for a while, and they take literally an entire pattern to reorient the slot.
Yeah.
And that is just such a relaxing way to dance West Coast swing, regardless of the speed of the song. Like, it feels gooey, slow, but it's also helpful, fast.
Yeah.
Since it's my new favorite topic, do you want to talk about how she connects into this anchor?
You can.
And instead of me talking about it, I want you to talk about it because you're the one that taught me this thing. So everybody gets it from you.
Are you talking about kind of the panel-y things?
Yeah.
So one thing that as a follow is really helpful to not only communicate where you're at to your lead, but to kind of have some more control over the timing and the situation of things. So you can kind of use the panels on your body. If you haven't heard of panels, just think of panels as like one side of the body and the other side of the body, right? So like one side of the torso, the other side of the torso, those are your panels on the sides. And so if you think of the way I kind of like to explain it is like rounding out to switch from one panel to the other, right? So you can see Emeline starts going into this with her right panel forward, and she tries to settle back. And as she does so, she kind of rounds out through her back and brings the left panel forward and settles back heavy with that right panel and or hip, depending on how you want to word it or look at it. But she is using mostly that hip weight and then just the direction change of the right side. So we're switching from the right side being pointing forward to pointing back behind you. And that will give you, like, you can choose how fast you kind of rotate through that. It'll give you a little bit of control timing wise, and that allows you to communicate to your partner where you're at weight wise and where you're at time wise. And you can see what she's doing with it is it's ever so slight because Jakub is very good at countering her, but she is taking the hand, right? And as she is pulling the right side back, right, the whole shoulder, like all of that side of the body is moving back together. So her hand, it's not going anywhere in comparison to where it's already at, like on the body. It's actually just moving back with her as she's opening backwards with it. So the hand is coming towards her. And that's what is communicating to the lead, right? That's what's giving the weight.
Mm-hmm.
Is that moving of the hand. If you do this and your hand does not go anywhere, you're just moving the trunk and not taking the shoulder and hand with it, so the whole arm with it, that doesn't do anything.
That's how you get overextended.
Yeah.
And then another thing I want to emphasize, because the term flashlighting came up when I was teaching last week. And again, that's another great training wheel concept tool for a lot of different partner dances, just to make sure that you're facing your partner. But in West Coast swing, flashlighting is often unhelpful, I would say, because so much of our, like, the function of a West Coast swing connection is depending on lines of tension. And unless you have both hands and you're just like leaders left follows right, leaders right follows left, you got both hands going, that makes sense to be flashlighting each other, because you're being tethered via both of your panels, equal and opposite. But most of the time, we're only tethered via one side of our body relative to a partner, which means we're going to be opening up to one side of the slot or the other. I find that to be something that hinders a lot of people. It can be a useful tool, but we actually don't use it that much in West Coast swing.
Yeah, no.
That's why I wanted to bring it up.
I know a lot of instructors have given up teaching it that way. They do not do it anyway. They say it's an old way of teaching, because it can be so detrimental to what we do, just fundamentally. Like, it's kind of sometimes helpful a little bit when you are first learning for some concepts, but there's other ways to teach the same concepts, the same results, that don't have so much limiting factors in terms of like movement and shaping and connection. So it's kind of for one specific thing. Teaching.
Then there's one last thing I want to highlight about this, because if you're a follower who's like, but that's going to make me heavy, we leaders want that. we want this connection. So the idea that, okay, you get a handhold, and then Emeline is using her panels to bring her right side back and taking her right hand with her. That is giving Jakub so much opportunity to adjust that. He chooses to reel out the rope to add more length. But he could post that center counterpoint, and that energy she would be using to bring her right panel back, she would still be settling with her right panel, but her left panel would then come forward. And it's giving your leader more actually ability to lead you in more finite ways by having that heavier connection. Like, there are so many different things a leader could do from this kind of connection to adjust what's going on for different effects, for different leads. And if instead a follower were to take that right side back, but leave the hand behind and get their arm longer and overextend themselves, that literally disengages the follow. And as a leader, I can't do anything with that.
Right. I know Miles and Tessa, I haven't listened to how they teach things in a while, but I know they at least used to talk about slingshots, like an actual like slingshot of sorts. Like, if you think about it that way, like, you have to pull back, and it's like a really heavy, like it gets really heavy before you release it to go forward. And like, that's the same idea in West Coast swing. Like, you have to have that heavy connection so that you can have good body flight to move into the next thing. And it helps with acceleration, and there's so many different things that it's helpful for. Like, you really have to have that weight in order for you to use your, like, otherwise it just doesn't work very well. And that's in my opinion. That's what happens when we tend to see like lack of body flight. So people that look like they're kind of just walking on their own and not like they're dancing together, like there's not, like a fluid movement to it. That's because there's not a lot of weight in the connection or change in weight in the connection, right? So it doesn't grow or decrease.
Right. And just to highlight it, the way Jakub is countering this weight here is with this back break step with his left foot. And he's doing a little bit more of sending his hips back into it because he's intending to do a trading places. So he is traveling just as much as she is. So he's doing this back break and then driving himself forward opposite her. But yeah, don't be afraid of being heavy. It's actually exhausting to lead a light follow or to follow a light lead. Because we can use each other.
Right.
Brandy has a great way of saying it. It's like, I'm going to use them. I don't remember. If somebody remembers the quote, drop it in the comments because it's a good one. But it's true for both roles.
Yep. It makes it a lot easier to use the other person. That's what makes the dance fun. That's what makes the dance, so easy to flow through when you are able to use your partner. And there was something else I was going to say. What else was I going to say? Shoot.
I have something if you want to take a moment to think about it. So this also reminds me of something that I've been noticing a lot recently is the lack of partnered rhythm. And it's like this person is dancing their rhythm, which is with the music, but this other person is dancing their rhythm, which is also with the music, but they're both kind of dancing the music differently and they're slightly off. Their triples aren't synchronized. But when you take advantage of the West Coast Swing connection correctly, your triples end up being at the same time. And the way you're moving through them is the same. And it creates beautiful partnered rhythm. And so I was noticing that in a practice session that I was lucky enough to be invited with a group of people recently. And it was like my main comment for everybody, because everybody's so focused on doing their own thing that like the connection almost becomes an afterthought instead of it being, it should be the foundation upon which you're dancing with your partner. What is happening?
There's like a ton of fireworks going off right over there.
I cannot hear anything.
Like I can see them. There's a ton of them. I don't know. That was like a good full minute of just fireworks. Like,
okay.
Sorry. I was like, what is that?
This is very concerned. Your face was concerning.
Because I like started hearing a bunch of noise and I was like, what is that? That's so random. It sounds like there's somebody like knocking outside on the outside of the house. And I like looked back and there's just a bunch of fireworks.
Oh my God.
Anywho.
Did you remember the thing you were going to say?
I can't remember what I was going to say.
It'll probably come back. We're definitely talking about that.
Yeah. Do you want to start?
Oh, geez. Where do I start? Just like the quality of control. Because the thing that isn't boggling the thing that's boggling my mind is not her balance.
Yeah.
It's her transition connecting through her frame as her frame is moving.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I find impressive. Because if particularly you watch her right arm.
Yeah.
So she hits that pose and she cushions into it, but then she keeps rotating. And so she almost like over rotates her right shoulder and continues connecting in with him. And that's just smooth as butter. Yeah. The entire time she's transitioning through that rotation and on one foot, it's just, but she's tethering so well. And of course he is creating a connection that is facilitating that.
Right.
So he's very much nursing that right to right handshake hold and making it as stable for her as possible and adjusting where it is relative to his ribs based on her torso traveling back down the slot. But like as masterful partnering in that handhold right there. Your turn.
I actually want to start with what she does beforehand, that like body position that she's in right here. So I wanted to talk about this really fast because we often talk about like not breaking your frame by like letting your back or your hips get too far away from where your shoulders are at. And she's actually doing this right here, but like intentionally. Right. So the way that she's backing up, like she's starting backing up through the hips, but then what she's doing is she's not continuing to send the hips back as she's like arcing, right? She's actually letting the hips kind of stall and pulling the shoulders up over the hips and like bringing the shoulder back into its settled place, right? So you can see as she's then coming forward, that's when she's reconnecting totally with that right shoulder. And she's kind of pulling herself into the shoulder as she's rolling it back. And so she's, yes, kind of disconnecting because of the way that she's arcing through the back, but it's like it's a movement through, right? It's not the movement that she's trying to do to finish something. It's like moving through this in order to get to this next position. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But yeah, so she is disconnecting in terms of she's rounding out the back, but she's doing it in the sense that she's throwing the hips back and then reconnecting, like almost stacking the body back on top of each other.
Yeah. And like the rate at which, so she hits the end of her rope this way. The rate at which this shoulder moves forward versus this shoulder moves forward is very different. This one is going slower, whereas this one is going faster. So you're still having that like panel situation going on. And that's how she's able to continue connecting and not get ahead of the lead. That sounded like a sentence that had more, but I intonated it incorrectly. There was no more.
That was everything.
That is the story of my life. That is how I speak English.
So I wanted to start by talking about that. So then coming into this here, right? Because of the way that she is kind of resettling into the arm's already kind of straight. So as she's kind of going into this rotational movement, she's kind of just locking her body in place and like tethering around it. So like when she hits this right foot, she kind of is locking that whole side of her body into place as is for the most part, and letting the left side kind of swing around and do its thing. And the right side is what's kind of controlling the weight that she's giving Jakub based on how far away she's getting with her left foot and how much she's rotating into that left side.
Mm-hmm.
And then because she, like you were saying, kind of over rotates it, she takes the weight that she had and she kind of, so as she's coming around, right, she has it kind of locked in place so that it's like to her side. But what she does is because she over rotates it, she actually lets it kind of release for a hot second and puts the weight more back into the back of the shoulder. Mm-hmm. Instead of having it pull, she changes it and has it push. And that's a pretty natural transition, the way that she does it.
Mm-hmm.
Because once she hits kind of just like a maximum position for her shoulder, she just keeps it going in order to get that pushing. Because you can, like, once you hit your max for like where you're pulling, generally you can hit that where you can push just by shifting ever so slightly.
It's so smooth. Like it almost looks like CGI, like how smooth it is. Like that's the kind of thing, if I were in animation school and I had animated it, my teacher would have been like, no, people can't do that. That's how smooth it looks.
But it's a very, like, she does a really good job of just letting it naturally move through into the next position that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I know what I was going to say earlier.
Woo!
We were talking about the panels and the weight in the connection, right? So talking about this, we're talking about, like, you want to make sure the hand is moving and you're pulling back, right? But when we're saying you're wanting to give the weight, what we don't want to happen is for you to give the weight by literally pulling from the arm, right? If you're going to pull, it needs to be pulling as in this arm is locked in place and we're pulling back with the whole body. That's the pulling, right? It's not like, here's my body, here's my arm, I'm pulling just my arm towards me, because that creates tension that you don't want. And it gives less control to the rest of the body. It actually creates weight in a really weird way that kind of disconnects almost. It doesn't allow your partner to really sense where you're at weight wise, because it's from pulling rather than from the, like, natural weight of the body.
Right. And what's interesting is most follows are really hyper aware of that distinction when their leaders do an arm lead on one instead of a body lead. Yeah. So now in this paneling concept is when you have the opportunity to do the same thing correctly, use your body instead of your arm.
Yeah.
So just take your hand with you. You don't have to move your hand faster or slower than your body. It's just you're a Barbie, hands going with you. That's all.
Yeah. So, like, what we mean when we say take your hand with you, what you can do, like, so if you're connected up, right, what can happen is you can kind of disconnect the shoulder and still move the body away, right? And that's what creates that disconnect. So when you break it, like when you move away and leave the arm there, that's what breaks the frame. And we don't want that. So we also don't want the opposite, where you're pulling just the hand, right? So we don't want just the body to move away. We don't want just the hand to move away. We want the whole thing to move at the same rate together.
And as a follow, if you're like, but center counterpoint, the hand shouldn't be moving, it's the leader's job to not let your hand move. You still apply the force.
Right.
So you don't have to think about it.
Right. And sometimes, like, your hand, it will move. Like, you want it to be moving in terms of, like, what you're doing. Just because you have a center counterpoint doesn't mean it's always going to stay in the exact same spot in space all the time.
Right.
Right. It's like there will be moving depending on what's going on.
I love how we didn't prep. And this episode is so juicy. I think it's my new favorite.
Getting so detailed.
Yup. All right. And we didn't explicitly spend any time on the hand that's above, but, like, obviously that is providing stabilizing additional connection. Just because we didn't talk about it doesn't mean it's not important.
It's mostly there for balance and shaping purposes, more so than, like, having a lot of weight into it for tethering and stuff like that.
Right.
There is some, yes, but that's not the main one it's going into. It's mostly going into that right hand.
Right. And it's also really helpful, like in that moment where you said where she has to kind of like release the shoulder just a hot second to change the direction of the connection. That stabilizing hand is really helpful for that to take over. So she's not just out in the middle of nowhere for 0.02 seconds.
Right. Yeah. And the reason that like we know that it cannot be equally weighted is just because of the shape that it's in. Her shoulder is too compromised in order for there to be like a ton of weight going into that arm.
Mm-hmm.
Or equal as the other. Like it's not in the right. Our shoulders are really weak when we get to a certain point of like up over our head. Yeah. So it's just not going to have the same weight in it.
Yep.
Do you want to talk first? Do you want me to talk?
Geez. Okay, let's just talk some basic mechanics. So going into this, Jakub is really getting up into her armpit with his left arm, and he's making sure to get that arm like out away from his body, so she has some room to duck her head really comfortably underneath. She's not having to take her like thoracic spine into the duck too. It's just her head and neck. Oh, I got to do that a few times last night.
Oh, fun.
It's magical when it's just your head.
Right?
Curse of the tall follow. Anyways.
You and danced with a couple people that were like your height or taller.
Yeah, so. Yeah. Both Tyson and Robert are taller than me. I was just like, this is fun. So, and then with the other hand, he's doing a really just gentle kind of face loop up and over his head, but placing her arm across his upper back. Yeah. The goal is to get their shoulders as close as possible, which then makes their ribs as close as possible and their hips as close as possible. Because this shape that they end up in, wow, that crosshair is in an awkward place, is possible because there's like full body contact. Like she's sitting on him kind of, even though she's in like a planked position. They are sharing a center essentially. And that full body contact is allowing this moment to happen. Like they're really stable here. Yeah. Like I bet her quad would start cramping eventually. Yeah. Just holding this leg up, but like they are so stable, and he's got his left arm across her back, up under her armpit, her arms wrapped around him. They're really stable here, and that's why they're able to like take their time with it. So your turn.
So one thing that I wanted to mention about kind of what you said about him putting her arm on his shoulder, he's not like forcing it there. Mm-hmm. He's just kind of releasing it there for her to place where it's comfortable. Mm-hmm. And that's super important. I don't love seeing when leads leave that hand trapped in a handhold.
Yeah, they do the loop, and then they like hold on to it.
Yeah. It's a really uncomfortable feeling sometimes. Like sometimes it's led well height wise, it's an okay thing, but sometimes height wise it makes it really uncomfortable, and as a follow it feels less stable to have that handhold than to have your hand like on its own wrapping around where is a comfortable position for you. And you can see like her hand, he does place it like he releases it almost like even past his shoulder, but she brings her hand like right in his kind of neck area because that's what's comfortable for her. And the way that she does it, it almost makes it look like he's like shrugging because it's up.
Yeah, because she picks up his shirt a little bit.
Yeah, it like shortens his neck.
She's like holding onto his clavicle.
Yeah, but that's because that's where like a comfortable position for her is, based on the angle that she's at and what she's doing. Like it just, I don't personally like the handhold as much as when you are released and you can put your hand wherever it feels more stable, because especially with like this is such a different angle of like away energy for her because of the way that she's planked and her foot is extended, but not just extended, it's extended like in a like a very intentional line. right? If you extend your leg, but it's kind of relaxed, it's different. It doesn't have quite as much weight to it. And so that gives a lot of different weight in a different angle than you might be used to with this type of like sit dip. And so, especially with the way she does this, it's important for her to be able to put her hand in a spot that she feels like she can counter herself best. So that was my first little thing I wanted.
And then I just love the detail that that Jakub tends to like touch her leg in moments like these in their partnership to be like, this is the thing I want to move. So he's not making her bend her leg. He's just like, it'd be cool if you did something with this. And it's just a really unique thing that I really enjoy personally.
Yeah, and he does it like in a, okay, let's release this. Let's kind of move this from where it's at type. And what I love is that because she has all this tension from the like planking she's doing with the upper body and then the full extension she has with the leg, I love that she adds in the extended hand with that tension, and she just kind of everything and closes the hand. It's just such a nice little touch.
Yeah, I love it so much. And then the way she melts down into the sit and lets her neck, so she not only lets her head go backwards ever so slightly, but turns to her left. So if you follow the point of her nose is delayed in rotation compared to her chest.
Yeah.
And that little we call it overlapping action in animation. It's just a lovely extra effect that makes it so much prettier.
Yeah, the delayed movement. It's like a ripple effect, you know?
Yeah, like a corkscrew up the spine.
Yeah,
in this instance.
Yeah, but it's such a really nice moment from both of them, and that's something that takes a lot of like paying attention to your partner. And yes, these two are, you know, they're partners apart from just this Jack and Jill. But it's something that like this type of thing you could achieve even with a partner that you didn't know as well, if you're really paying attention to what the other is doing. This just happens to be something that these two like to do frequently, but it's not something that is unachievable. It's just like you really have to be paying attention to what your partner is doing. And in this moment, like say you're in a spotlighted situation like these two are, if as the follow, you're not paying attention to what your partner is doing and instead you're looking out to the audience, you might not catch that. And that might not go quite the same way. I was just going to say, like, yes, this could be one of the moments where you as a follow would be able to address the audience if you wanted to. But I'm just saying that, like, yes, you could do that. But there's also benefit to not doing that because this is the moment that they created out of it. But that's because they were, you know, really focusing on what the other's doing and the music. So, like, there's benefits to both of it. And in terms of, like, if you're social dancing, obviously, this is like you want to be tuned into what your partner is doing. So
so an example that I really love, and it's a true Jack and Jill, is back when Thibaut Ramirez was in All-Star and drew Delancey von Langendorfer in the All-Star Jack and Jill at Boogie by the Bay. I forget what year, but it was a true Jack and Jill. They hadn't danced with each other before. They got a blues song and they absolutely knocked it out of the park, like well-deserved first place. One of my favorite dances. And part of what I love is both of them, even though it's a faster blues song, they're taking their time and paying attention to each other and making strategic partnered choices instead of trying to do all the things. And it just makes that dance shine. So if you're like, yeah, but this is Jakub and Emeline, I'm like, well, true Jack and Jill, you can still do that.
That was 2016, by the way.
Well done. 7 years ago.
Oh, this is the hand crawling.
I want to talk about it for a hot second. Because I don't know, I just love the use of dancing with your fingers. It's just so silly how she goes up and over his head.
His bun's just like
but like they dance with their whole bodies. Yeah. And like it's very common to have like hand positions, right? Mm-hmm. But to actually also dance with movement through the fingers is more rare. And so whenever I see it, it just makes me absolutely delighted. And then just the way he pushes up his glasses, I don't know, it gets me. It's so fantastic. But I just anyways.
I'm telling you, it's that the same vibe as Estelle, just putting her glasses casually back
on. Meanwhile, I'm over here so blind that if I were dancing in my glasses and they moved like a centimeter off center, I would be blind. Like I need those things behind the arms to like hold them in place, or I wouldn't be able to see. Okay, I want to talk about this. Because I think it gets to a soapbox that I've never had the opportunity to talk about on before.
How
many times have you been led into like a thing, but the leader decides to stop you on your like fleshy abdomen?
Yeah,
where there's no bone structure whatsoever. It's just organs. Like I talk about it on the side, that like judo chop all the time, but like stopping a follow on the front.
Yeah.
Like there's the actual like interpersonal boundary too, where it's like maybe don't touch a woman's stomach unless you know them really well, or follow his stomach, anybody's stomach. Nah. But like it's functionally unhelpful. Like he's just full on just going for her pelvis, her hip, and so she has a really strong connection. It feels more comfortable, and because this is like transitioning into a more staccato phrase in the music, he's having to be a little bit more like stop, not like full on this is a fast song, hiya, I need you to stop right here and now, but it has a little bit more breaking power than the example we saw earlier in the dance. And having a structural point on the follow's torso, like the hip, is a really helpful place to apply that stopping power without fear of like hurting your follow. Not gonna lie, I was mad the song like faded out so soon after that, because I'm like, I want more staccato phrase. Yeah. Give me more. Give me more. And I just want to highlight his foot positioning.
Yeah.
Because like when left to his own devices, he gets in these beautiful positions. Whereas like a lot of leaders, when they're trying to learn how to do the dancey dance part on their own, it's clear they don't have like that solo training where they have foot positions that they just land in via muscle memory. And Jakub is definitely one of those highly trained dancers that has lots of muscle memory for foot positions. And it does not, what's the word? It's not effeminate to do that in a masculine body. It still looks good.
One thing I want to talk about before we wrap up, I want to talk about what Emeline does with her isolations here. So what I love about this is that she's not like forcing herself to like get into a specific position. She's just kind of going with it as she's able to move through, right? So it doesn't look like she's rushing through anything. She's just kind of hitting the notes where she's at, rather than like trying to really force like a full switch or something like that. She just really like it does a good job of working with the spot that she's at. And that's what I like about watching her do like more isolated type things.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
she does do one full switch because she doesn't she does a slower hit and then she does hit 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 hit, right? And so she does that perfectly because she does have the time to make that full switch with the foot forward, but then she kind of presses the back foot back first and then she hits with the front twice. And I like it. It's not forcing anything. She's just kind of going where she's already at.
Mm-hmm. So relaxed and divine. Mm. That's a good way to describe the whole dance. Relaxed and divine.
Yeah.
Should we do a dramatic reading of the absurd YouTube comments now? No, we won't go there, but like, y'all, what is happening? These comments are horrifying. Say nicer things. Thanks. Yeah. This dance was effing fantastic.
Yeah.
I will not be told otherwise.
I believe that is everything. I think we have something scheduled for next time. I don't remember what it is, though.
Something.
Oh, well, you'll see it.
We'll figure it out. We will be back. We're not going anywhere. We're still here. And it still boggles my mind that some of you out in the wild recognize me with my flow mask on, because I wear it makes me look either like Miss Piggy or a stormtrooper. Pick your canon. I'm not mad about either one of them. But like, I'm immunocompromised, so I'm masking when I dance, and like, you can't tell from this tiny Zoom thing that I'm 5'11" and a fat femme presenting, even though I'm non-binary. There's shenanigans going on. But some of you out there can recognize me, and it boggles my mind, and I adore you all so much, because there are people that I've known for over a decade that don't recognize me. So y'all get 1,000 gold stars. Love you.
That call out.
It's a surprising amount of people. I'm just like, what?
Yeah.
I have a unique, rarely seen body type in the West Coast swing community. So you'd think that would be all that's needed. Yes, apparently not. I've been told I carry myself differently. I'm like, I'm sorry, that might be true, but I'm not bamboozling anyone. I'm sorry.
Anyways.
Thank you all for joining us. Bye.
Cool. Next time.